said that when he was a little bit younger, and he was driving from I think California, and then he went through Vegas. And by the time he got to Vegas, he already had a speeding ticket. He already had, his tank of gas was almost empty, and he was literally down to like no money at all. I think he said something like he had I know this isn't the correct amount of money, but maybe like $12 or so, something like that. So he goes, okay, this is all I have. And then some of his friends were like, dude, just go ahead and chuck it down the blackjack table, see what happens. So he's like, okay, fine, whatever. So they go in the casino, and he's like, here you go, it's $12, not enough for a tank of gas, not enough to pay my speeding ticket, that's like $100 and something. Here you go. Let's go play. And then he wins. So it's double or nothing, because it's blackjack. So all of a sudden that $12 becomes $24. He's like, okay, I'm winning. Still doesn't even get the tank full of gas, so just chuck it again. Let it ride. Let's go. 24 becomes 48.
Oh my God.
There you go. Here's your tank of gas. Well, he still had the speeding ticket too, so he's like, okay, let it ride. 48 becomes 96. Okay, let it ride. And he said at this point, he's like, okay, if I double this, I can get gas in my car, and I can pay off my speeding ticket. And guess what happens next? He loses. Yeah. So you guys were like paying attention to that in Sunday school. So he's just like, oh. But he was like, my attitude coming in with that $12, just going and just throwing it away, just not thinking he's going to win anything, and then getting double that. Then his attitude starts changing a little bit. It starts changing a bit more to the point where he becomes very, very, very invested in that $12. That became almost enough for him to walk away and have enough money to pay off his debts, right? So he talked about how in our walk with God, our Christian walk, a lot of times it can be like that. Where as we have more responsibilities, we have to make more of an effort to spend time with God. That spending time with God, spending time in prayer, doing the right thing, it starts to add up. That cost, that price starts to add up, where all of a sudden, what once was a very simple commitment for us as kids, all of a sudden we have to really make a conscious effort to keep God number one in our life. Right? So, when we talk about somebody who has everything to lose, let's take a look at Daniel chapter 6 and see how Daniel kept his faith in the story of Daniel and the lion's den. Now, where are we in history? Because I know at this point we kind of jumped books a little bit. We're kind of chugging along quite nicely in the time of the kings and now the exile. So right now, who knows where in the history of Israel the Israelites are at the beginning of Daniel? Who's in charge? King Darius. This is by Daniel chapter 6. Yeah. But who's in charge? Yeah. So that he is from where? Starts with the B. Babylon. So the Babylonians were kind of the big guys in charge at the beginning, right? And then of course we know that their empire eventually comes to an end. Now, at the end of the Babylonian Empire, what empire do we get that kind of springs up? Starts with a P. The Persians. So the Persians are kind of the new kids on the block, right? So the Persians are the new big empire that's starting to raise up. And at this point in Daniel has been a loyal servant to the Babylonian kings, right? He'd done the right thing. He showed the Babylonian Empire time after time after time again that the Lord's the true God. Right? Think of how many things he'd been through. And by this point in Daniel chapter 6, he'd already been through quite a bit and stayed faithful. So at this point, with Persia taking control, we'll see that they have a little bit of a different system of government. But Daniel, he's pretty high up there, right? And before we start reading, you mentioned King Darius. So Darius, historians actually, when they look at the Persian Empire, they can't really find a Darius. So they think that Darius in the Hebrew Bible is referring to one of three people. Either King Cyrus, the emperor, Persian Empire, right? Cyrus's son, or this guy, and I'm glad they do Darius in the Bible because this guy's name doesn't sound too swift. Gubaru. That just sounds doesn't sound catchy. But this guy, Gubaru, was actually placed as a regional king over Babylon and some of the surrounding areas by King Cyrus. And most historians and theologians agree this is probably the King Darius in the Bible. It's probably just a different name for him, right? So King Darius is in charge of Babylon and probably some of the surrounding areas. And the Persian Empire, we'll see, has a little bit different way of ruling. And Daniel has a lot to lose. So let's go ahead and start reading Daniel chapter 6, and we're just going to read about 5 verses at a time. So let's read the first 5 verses. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel was so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." Okay, so this is the first 5 verses. So you think there's 120 satraps, these kind of local, regional, small-time rulers. There's these 3 administrators who report directly to the king. They're above them. Daniel's one of them. And Daniel's doing such a great job that at this point the king is looking at making him kind of second in command, right? This is a big deal. Now, with any political appointment, as we're probably about to see with the 2020 elections, like any political appointment, the bigger, probably more true. With any political appointment, there's always some backlash. You're like, oh, I don't want that person to get promoted. I want that person to get elected. So what do you do if you're against them? You try to dig up something and kind of smear their name. You try to do something to disqualify them for their office of wherever they're going to be at, right? So we see that in modern day politics, that nothing really changed too much. I mean, people have the same attitude, where back then, the other administrators and satraps are like, okay, we need to find something on this guy. Otherwise, he's going to get promoted, and that just means we're that much farther away from being in charge, right? So they look at Daniel and the way that he's doing all of his government business and see if there's any corruption, anything he's cutting corners on. In fact, I think it's ironic because the name Daniel in Hebrew, Daniel, is God is my judge. That's actually what his name means in Hebrew. It's pretty cool, huh? That this is what Daniel's name is, and then other people are trying to judge him, and they can't find anything wrong with him. But they go, wait, there's one thing we might be able to get him on. He really is devoted to his God. So then they start hatching this plan. Let's see what they do with Daniel here in verse 6. So it goes, so these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. So here, these other government officials pretty much had conspired. Okay, we're going to get Daniel on this. We're going to say he can't pray to his God. And it wasn't uncommon for orders like this to go out. Now, in terms of the king, you go, well, why would the king sign off on something like this? Like, doesn't this just seem really fishy? Well, think about this. The king is being flattered by all these officials that are trying to say, hey, we all talked about this. And we think that you should make this decree because it would praise your name, and it'd just be a good choice. And that's what his advisors are saying. Now, number one, that's a lie, because obviously they didn't talk to everybody, and not everybody agreed on that, because who wouldn't agree to that? Daniel, right? So they didn't talk to everybody, but they're like, oh, hey, everybody thinks that you should go ahead and put this law in place, right? And the king might sign off on this, besides just being flattered and kind of getting tricked. A lot of times with new empires would do things like this to try to get a lot of unity and assert their control over the people they just conquered. Persian Empire is pretty new, and they're like, okay, let's give this a try. So now it's illegal to pray to anyone for the next 30 days besides the king. All of a sudden, those stakes went a lot higher for Daniel to continue worshiping God, to continue praising the Lord. So we all, obviously it would be Daniel in the lion's den to get himself in trouble, but what does Daniel do next, right? Verse 10. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home, went to his upstairs room, where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he'd done before. Then these men went as a group, and they found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, will be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. Now, it's really interesting how several times it points out that in Persian law, once something's written into law, it cannot be changed. Where else do we see this in the Bible? We actually see this in the book of Ruth. If you guys remember that. Where King Xerxes writes in, okay, well, on this day and this month, you can go ahead and, kill all the Jewish people you want and take all their stuff, right? And Esther, I'm so sorry. I said Ruth. Thank you so much. Yeah. So Esther, my bad. Yeah, Ruth and Naomi, that's a whole different story. Thank you. Esther. So Esther, going before King Xerxes. So what does Xerxes have to do? Well, Xerxes has to write in law, well, yeah, you can go out and try to kill the Jews, but we're going to go ahead and arm the Jews to the teeth, put the royal guards on their side, and they can kill you back and take your stuff if they want to. So that's how they get around the law there, right? Is, okay, well, we can't change the law, but we can amend it, so now the law is in the favor of the Jewish people, right? At this point, the king is like, well, the law is that no one can pray to any god except for the king for 30 days. And this one's looking a little bit like it'd be harder to twist and change. So the king's in a tough spot. You can tell that he cares for Daniel. You can tell that he doesn't want to do this. Daniel still goes up to his room to privately pray to God. Window facing towards Jerusalem. There are several passages in the Old Testament that talks about praying facing Jerusalem because the temple was in Jerusalem. Just giving him all the glory, honor, and praise to the Lord, like he'd done before. And what's the last thing that the king says before he has to throw Daniel into the lion's den? He actually gives him, I think that this reads more like a blessing than anything else. May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. So we know exactly how the story ends. This is a pretty famous passage, but let's read it for ourselves. Daniel 6:17-24. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and their children. But before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all of their bones. So we can see here, Daniel is miraculously protected by an angel of the Lord. And you think of how powerful witness this is to the king himself. That the king would say, did your God who you continuously serve, you serve this God, you don't give up on serving this God, has this God saved you? Has your God saved you, Daniel? And he goes, yeah. He sent an angel, he shut the mouths of the lions, and I'm innocent in his eyes. So, what does the king do at the end of this? And this is something that we miss a lot of times, is what he does next. In verse 25 it says, "And King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So the king sends out this edict pretty much declaring what had happened. And we see two things here. Number one, we see that God endures. We can see this pattern in Daniel's life, in all of the different circumstances that has tested the faith of him and his fellow Israelites throughout the Babylonian exile, and then the Persian, the time of the Persians, where soon they would be able to come back to Jerusalem, but it's not quite yet here. Now, all throughout this time, even without their homeland, the people remained faithful, and God continued to work miracles. And we see that the Lord endures. And the second one is kind of like that God rescues and saves. God was able to save Daniel. Right? So what's the result of this? Well, the stakes kept on getting higher and higher and higher for Daniel. He stayed faithful to God. He continued praying to the Lord. He continued to rely on God. Just like the king said, your God who you serve continually. God rescued him. Not only that, but it ends by saying, so Daniel prospered. Think about that for a moment. The stakes kept on getting higher, but Daniel held firm. Now, I'm going to be real with you guys. When you go from junior high, high school, don't the stakes get a bit higher? Don't your classes get a bit harder? And when you're looking towards college and you're looking at that GPA, it starts to get more and more of a time crunch for you to cram in those APs, to choose that major, to choose that school, to apply, to get it done, right? Yeah, so no matter what, the stakes keep on getting higher, right? And then when you go to college, all of a sudden, the stakes, again, they're getting higher. Now, some of you guys will work jobs during college. You're going to have to juggle all of the friendships, all the extra activities, all of the classes, and the stakes will keep getting higher. When you're out of college and you're in your career, working 40 hours a week. Now let's be real, a lot of you guys want to go into STEM careers, so you're going to be working 60 hours a week. And then when you're dead tired at the end of the day, working those double overtime shifts, fixing some IT problem for some of you guys, or working double shifts at a hospital, interning somewhere as a resident or something like that, when things are just going to get, stakes are going to get higher. If some of you guys get married, and you try to find a house, and you're signing more paperwork than you ever thought would be possible in your life, there's a whole packet to sign your house, the stakes got higher. When you have your own kids, and you go, how am I going to raise my kids up right? Stakes just got higher. When we look at our kind of the so-called golden years, and you're looking towards retirement, and you're going, well, what's my legacy? The stakes get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And for us to continually serve the Lord, for us to continue to put God first, it becomes more and more difficult. It's a sacrifice. Jesus calls us all daily to pick up our cross and follow Him. For some of us, it could be a huge sacrifice of our time. We are like, our schedules are busy from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. I mean, I saw some of you guys cramming for your Awana for this afternoon. So let's be real. Our time is so precious. Maybe slowing down and praying to God a couple times a day, opening up our Bible, doing our devotions, taking time to slow down, to catch up with a friend and ask if they're doing okay. Maybe that's a huge sacrifice. Or maybe for some of you guys, the fear of standing out. That if you followed God continually, you would stand out as, oh, I'm that Christian kid. And I'm going to get bullied for it. I'm going to get left out of things for it. The stakes are high. Well, let me tell you guys this. I am confident that just like with Daniel, that following the Lord, that's what's going to cause you all to prosper. You can get a lot of money, you can get a lot of stuff, you can get a lot of fancy titles added to your names, like doctor, or maybe, Vanessa and I had some friends who were girls that really wanted to be in Mrs. You really wanted to find that special someone. You can chase after stuff. You can chase after achievements, or you can put God first and let everything else come after that. Let's be confident that by putting God first, by continuing to do the right thing, even when the stakes get higher, God will continue to cause us to prosper. So let's not stop praising God. I think it's an amazing blessing to live in a country where we don't have to worry. It's not like somebody's going to say, well, for the next 30 days you're not allowed to pray in America. I don't think that we're anywhere close to that. There's people that would say like post-apocalyptic, whatever, that's going to happen. But let's be real, no one's stopping you from praying today. No one's stopping you. While the stakes are low, while we're not being outright, jailed for our faith, can we be faithful in the small things now today? Can we be faithful when it's not illegal to pray? Can we be faithful when we have a little bit more free time than we will a couple years down the line? Can we be faithful in the small things today? Continually praising God and set up a pattern where we put God first, a habit of putting God first to prioritize our faith. Right now when we got small things, so that when the stakes go higher, just like Daniel, it's going to be fun. I want to pray for you guys and invite the worship team up as we do another song and collect tithes and offerings. So let's go ahead and pray. Lord, we thank you. We thank you that you have the power to save us. We thank you that you are faithful, you are good, and that no matter what tomorrow brings, you're there. I pray, Lord, that we can continue to put you first, we can continue to praise you without ceasing, that while the stakes are a bit lower than they can be, that we can continue to trust in you. So when when things get rough, when we feel tested, when we feel persecuted, when we feel like we have no time, no energy, nothing left to give, that we can still put you first, Lord. Pray, Lord, that we can be known as people who continually praise you, who continually serve you, just like Daniel. We pray this in your name. Amen.